Normally, yeah. Hi everyone. Hope you're well. How's everything going? It's been such a long time since we're live. Susan and I are here to welcome you guys back to our live shows, which we are going to still be having on Mondays for sure. And we're going to have another live show either Friday or Sunday. We haven't yet decided. And where we can, we'll still have our geopolitical shows. So we're back. And guess what? This time we're bigger and better, and some of us are even detained and deported post, some of us. So anyway, hope you guys are good. It's been so long. I've really been missing talking to you people. Today we have a very full, we have very full menu for you. Literally, we're just going to talk about what's going on in Kenya generally. We hope that you're going to join us in the comment section. I have provided a link there so that you can join us in the StreamYard. Or if you're joining us from YouTube or Facebook, you're welcome to, participate on those channels as well. Any of you guys understand this thing to do with, some stickers that we're being given, like YouTube has a way to pay people who are going on live, they're called super chats and smart chats and things like that. You're welcome to buy a smart chat or a super chat if you're on YouTube and support our channel. Or if you're interested, you can also, make a mention there and we'll give you an M-Pesa number so that you can support Susan and I so that we can do the research and bring you our live shows. I see one of you are watching us already, so we're really happy that you're here. In fact, two of you now are on board and we're really happy. Karibuni sana, karibuni. I'm actually coming to you from the beautiful city of Cardiff. I call myself African Queen Mo Cardiff, but I'm always in Nairobi. Right now I'm in Cardiff. Susan is in Nairobi, so we have a 2-hour time difference. So without wasting your time, let me allow Susan to introduce herself and say hi. Susan, it's been a long time. You're back by popular demand. Karibu.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussions. Please let us engage. We're just whetting your appetite and looking forward to, a rich conversation with you. Thank you so much, Queen Mo, for having me.
More than welcome, Susan. So I don't know, where do we start? Susan is going to take on most of the show actually, because she's the one in Nairobi. In terms of like filling in the gaps, like what's happening. I bring up the title, she brings in the gaps, and I try to look for the information. Hopefully some of you guys know what's been going on in Kenya, but from what I'm hearing and from what I'm reading, it just seems like a big fat jumble and mess in my view. Yeah. First of all, right now, what's hot off the news, I saw that there was some security personnel that surrounded Mr. Gashagua's residence, I think it was. And as I think I saw that. And in Kitale as well. Was it Natembea or who is it? So we have some people, plainclothes police or security people who went to their residences. And my question is, why? What's happening? What's the problem? What's going on? Yeah. Why are these people being, why are they being followed by security? What's happening? Why? What's the problem, guys? Can you please help us understand? Us guys are in diaspora. We are now kind of like far away from the news. We don't know what's going on there. And we saw that Gashagua's case was on just the other day, that he was impeached. And the question is, I think the question they're trying to determine is whether due process was followed. Right now, the issue of due process is being challenged everywhere because, as we have also seen, people are being deported. I was deported the other day from the US, from the US border. And fortunately for me, I was just sent back on a flight back to the UK, through the UK, which was coming to, through the UK and then eventually one day go back to Kenya. But I'm one of the lucky ones because I saw online that even a green card holder, an American, actually he's German, green card holder, has been in the US from 2007 till now for like about 17 years. He's been there. 2017 till now. He's been there for a long time. And he works as an engineer, but the guy was actually shackled, taken and put in prison by ICE. He was there for 2 months. So now we've also seen people like, Martha Karua being literally detained, not really detained, but deported, detained for a short while and then deported. We also saw that happen, the same thing to Willie Mutunga. These people were going to observe a case in one of the East African courts in Tanzania. And I was asking Susan as a lawyer, are people not allowed to go and observe cases, especially against somebody who is a fellow lawyer, who is the head of the opposition, yeah, in Tanzania, who has been accused, of treason, literally? Is it that people cannot actually go and see these cases and watch the cases and ensure that justice is served? The same thing as you saw happened in Uganda, where we had Besigye also. He's also kind of like being accused of treason, and the guy went on a hunger strike and literally looks like bones right now. And I believe Kenyans have also tried to go and participate in those court processes, at least as observers. And I don't know whether they've been allowed or not in Uganda. But I know in Tanzania right now we are having some sort of diplomatic problem, I believe. Although the Kenyan government is saying that it's not going to affect Kenya and Tanzania relations, it's still a tiff. It's still an issue, and it makes us uncomfortable because we have Tanzanians in Kenya and we have Kenyans in Tanzania. And the question is, we are all carrying blue East African passports. So right now, the issue is about due process. What is happening to the whole issue of due process, whether it comes to impeachments, whether it comes to security surrounding politicians' homes, threatening their lives, whether it comes to diplomacy and detentions and repatriations. What is happening to the issue of due process in the judicial sector of the world generally? Susan, our lawyer, can try to tackle that one from all angles. Karibuni, all of you guys who are here, welcome. And please feel free to come in the comment section and type in, or even just join us in the StreamYard. Welcome.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot of drama. Am I loud enough?
Yeah, you are. I can hear you.
Okay. Definitely, there's been a lot of drama from those type of situations. Like when Martha Karua, she's not alone. She was with some other Kenyan lawyers. I'm not sure whether or not the former Chief Justice Maraga was with her, but I know he was there, and they had gone to
Okay, to
observe.
answer your question on the former Chief Justice Maraga, he was the only one who was allowed in, and he's actually in the court. He was allowed in
Yeah,
Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and he's actually managed to get through. But Willy Mutunga, who was also previous
yeah,
Chief Justice, he was actually thrown out. Yeah, he was not allowed to go in. Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting. Okay, because really, cases are supposed to be heard in open court. Because when you have a case, you're entitled to certain things. One is to be heard in court and in an open court, or to be heard in public, so that other people can observe what's going on. And so you have a right to be heard, which involves you being heard in an open space, and also a right to defend yourself. So, and to hear the charge, any charge that has been brought against you. So, what I think the Kenyan lawyers were going to do was really to observe the proceedings, and perhaps they exercise their rights of entry, of determining who is allowed to enter Tanzania, and they stop them right there at the point of entry. Don't forget that Martha Karua was also involved in Besigye's case. In fact, he was kidnapped from Kenya when he was supposed to be meeting Martha Karua. I'm not sure whether they met or whether it was after. And she went to Tanzania, and she applied to be allowed to be on the panel of lawyers, and she was disallowed. Rules are generally is that you can't just practice in another country. Practicing certificates are country, it depends on the country, and each country has its own system of registering people who can practice in their jurisdictions. It's possible that Martha Karua, I know she asked for permission to argue in Besigye's case, or to represent him. So she could have had she could have got the right certification to be able to do that. So when it comes to a country exercising its sovereignty, it can allow and disallow people to enter. Same thing with what's happening in the US when they're turning people away from the border and point of entry, or even making them exit, even though it is forcing them to leave, deporting people who have green cards and deporting people who are, who seem to have legitimate legal basis to be in the US, for instance. They're being kicked out and deported. Not sure where they're being deported to, if they are actually American citizens. That I digress. But basically, that's it. So they exercise their right to determine who can enter their country, and that's why Martha and the other lawyers were turned away. Perhaps somebody like and then Willy Mutunga, a former Chief Justice, he's associated with the civil rights and movement, and he's very vocal about human rights, respect for human rights. But Maraga, perhaps not so much, because he was a judge of the Supreme Court. He was a judge previous, a magistrate or a judge previous to that, and maybe he's not so associated with human rights like Martha and the former Chief Justice Willy Mutunga. So I think that's actually what happened, and when they were turned away. But I think this is my own opinion, is when people are deeply engaged in human rights issues, because even I've seen a clip where Martha is speaking up about the Natambea issue, about the way his home was raided, the way he was, and when we're trying to arrest him, and she has spoken up against that. And truth be told, Martha Karua has always been very vocal on breach of the constitution, people's constitutional rights, and the upholding of human rights and constitution, the constitution. So she that is her area of law. So she would speak up about that. So even Natembeya, she has spoken about it, and there was quite a circus or a melee at his home, and the people from the area pushed back, and I think they intimidated those who had gone to arrest him. But I saw another clip showing that he has been arrested and has been taken. He's been arrested, and they're basically saying that there's some money, something to do with some money. But there's also the fact that we know he's a very vocal politician, and he speaks speaks vocally and loudly about the things that don't make him happy. And he could, in fact, they're saying that they said that he's been arrested for hate speech. There's some money that's missing, and also hate speech. But Natembeya is a very, very vocal politician. So there's been that. It was big, to do. The people from his area, they wrecked the cars of the EACC, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. They wrecked their cars, intimidated them. There were so many and stuff like that. So it was not an easy job for him to be arrested. So that's what's been happening. There's the drama too, as you mentioned, with Gachagua, where there was a disruption of his party launch by whoever, and I think it was deflected by his own security people, from what I gathered, and so it was a messy affair, as I saw in a clip. They said it was a messy affair. I'm not sure whether it's what he was saying or what happened. It's a messy affair, but we do know that that's not the first time that Gachagua has been attacked in the public setting like that. So we're seeing quite a lot of this happening. Also, yes, to go back on Natembeya's drama, there was some protests in various parts of the country. I saw some clips about protests. Apart from protests in Kitale, there was also protests in the CBD. So Kenyans right now are very forthright about expressing themselves and exercising their constitutional rights to show their pleasure or displeasure on issues. And of course, we've seen quite a bit of high-handedness from the security, from the police, and and those who are supposed to be regulating behavior. So that's actually what's been happening. So lots of drama. Whenever you watch the news, there's always something happening. We're just trying to do a summary, and it's so so many things have been happening in the period we've not been live. So it's difficult to sort of put them in a package. But when we talk about insecurity again, we're talking also about the issues of domestic violence cases. We've seen quite a few of them reported in the news. Terrible cases. I think one of the more recent ones is a knife attack to the head by an intimate partner who, for 2 years, they'd been living together for 2 years, and the lady was unalived. Of course, questions are being asked, and issues about how do we prevent this? What are the red flags? That's a continuing conversation that we must continue to have. Also, horrible cases about child molestation, sexual assault by parent in the absence of the mother. There was even one which was even worse, where the mother went to cover up the sexual assault of the stepfather, decided to pour hot water on the child, on the little girl, and burnt her body severely. So from I think from the waist down, she poured steaming hot water on her, and she was suffering serious burns because she's as the teller of the news said, she cried until she could cry no more. She was just issuing weak whimpers. And you can imagine that's your own mother who has done that to you.
To protect your stepfather.
Yeah, because she
How
didn't
old
want.
was the child?
She didn't.
How old is the
I
child?
forget.
Are they under
Yeah, she
18?
was young.
Well, obviously they're under
Oh,
18.
definitely.
Are
A
they like
child.
7,
A child.
6? A child.
She was a child below 10 years, I think.
Women have to examine our priorities, and that's another issue. We have to examine our priorities as mothers, as parents. Our children should always be number one. The security of our children and of other people's children should be always number one. Before you secure an adult, secure a child. Doesn't matter whether you like the child or not, doesn't matter. If you can't secure the child, if you find that you are biased towards your child, you could be a step parent like me, I'm a stepmom. If you find that you're not, please walk out or give the child away to someone else. But please, this idea of we cannot sit back and allow our children to be molested and abused and burnt up and beaten up for no reason. That's a very, very violent society, and one that is really lacking in any sort of morals or boundaries. I think we actually create young people who no wonder many young people cannot tolerate the older generation, because a lot of the times the older generation did not protect the young people. Yeah, so I hope that the legal enforcement people are going to deal seriously with the woman who did this to her child, as well as the man, because this is
Yeah.
really very sad. Very, very, very sad. It's amazing. Yeah, the child, I've actually witnessed a child in a hospital suffering, I don't know what degree burns, because the child, when my son was in the hospital when he was a small 2-year-old, he had an ear infection. And next to him was a little child who was also 2 years old, who had put his hand inside a pot, a pot, a nyungu, because he was going to get meat. He went to get meat with his cardigan, his sweater. So the whole sweater got stuck all over his hand. And now, they have to wash that all of, that child cried until there was no more tears left. He would cry every day. They would come and wash his hand every single day. I mean, the torture of burns, people just don't understand. Yeah. So anyway, I can see people are talking over here. Gypsy Corner is saying some human beings need education. Really sad. Yeah, I agree with you. Gypsy Corner, absolutely. Grace Agenda is also with us. Karibu Sana Grace. Everybody else who's on here, you're welcome to come into the comment section and say something about whatever Susan is talking about here. Yeah. So we're talking about violence, and also, the cost of living is also affecting the economy. The economy right now, when I was looking at this about 3 weeks ago, not even long ago, yeah, I could already see the stress on many, many people. Many people cannot afford to eat more than one meal a day. So all of that, coming together. And then now when we see in the education sector, now moving from security to education, you see that the Higher Education Loans Board, 300 or 400,000 students at risk of not receiving the HELB. And then again, we're hearing rumors, I don't know whether they're true or not, that some of the children may have to repeat classes because the government doesn't have money for them to do their exams. How true is that? How far have they gone with that? Because really, that would be just like disastrous, wouldn't it be? Since when is it okay to get children to repeat their classes just because the government cannot find some money after giving donations to churches, 20 billion shilling donations to churches, and spending money every single day just in arbitrary expenditure? All of a sudden you don't have money for children to do exams. You know what I would do if I was the government, if there was no money to do exams? Give every child a leaving certificate and let them move to the next class. But because you see, there's a lot of money to be made by the publishers. They're the people who benefit from the exams themselves. Yeah. And there's a lot of benefit from making children repeat classes because, again, it means that the government gets more money. But, recently I remember now parents, I believe, have to pay school fees for public schools through the e-citizen account. So there should be better accountability by the government for school fees. So why is it that now all of a sudden there's no money to pay for exams? Does this make sense? Although I did see that CS Mbadi said that parents don't really have to worry about this. But when, parents are getting mixed messages, some parents have already paid, privately for the exam just to make sure that their children do it. But what happens to kids who cannot afford to pay for their exams?
Yeah, it's not supposed to happen because, when we think about one of the ways that we're trying to create a better society is to make sure that education is available, access to education is available to all.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
in fact, the report you're talking about is that they appeared before the education committee in the National Assembly, and some questions were asked because the education budget was missing a lot of things. And the amount that's given toward education, I think, is one of the highest in the budget. But what happened is for examination and invigilation, there was no budget. And then again, for capitation, apart from there being delays and parents are being forced to go into their pockets so that the schools can continue to pay. And you can imagine the effect of that, the domino effect of asking parents to pay for money, which normally the government would have paid for, just so that the schools can continue. They don't want their children's education to be disrupted. It's actually affecting the disposable income the family has, so less money is going into other basic needs because you're trying to keep your child in school. But there have been some serious deductions on the capitation. It has been reduced, if I'm not wrong, from for free primary education, the amount that is there is now 1.2 billion, and for juniors 14.751, which is a reduction on what they're supposed to actually give. And for invigilation, when they checked, they saw an examination that there was no budget allowed. Again, for quality assurance, again, there was no budget allowed. And for that amount, there was the upgrading of their management system. Again, there was no budget allowed. So you can imagine if these essential ingredients are missing from the education system where they've not allowed it, it makes no sense. So what the CS was put on in the stand, he was put on the spot, and he was asked, what's this about? And he says, well, what happened is that through what they called, the cabinet cut these things out through what they call rationalization process prior to the budget being brought to the National Assembly Education Committee. So, of course, they burst out laughing when they were thinking, oh, really? How is that a good explanation? They're saying they rationalized, and then they removed core ingredients. The government is not supporting core ingredients for these young children. It's just like, sort of passing the message that it's only if you have money can you complete school, which is defeating,
which is really crazy.
The idea of free primary education, So, and then of course the school feeding program was badly affected. We know that many programs, education and school is one of the ways we say we can protect children because we know where they are. We keep them safe. They're getting food through the school feeding program, and it has been reduced from 7.2 billion to 3 billion. So, the investment in education has been cut, say, to about 50% when it comes to the school feeding program. The teachers are up in arms, feeling very, upset about the whole thing. Parents, of course, are also very upset because they have to look for money that they don't have to keep their children in school. They're always being sent messages, and you're told your child will come home. Your child is in Form 4, and you've been told your child will come home tomorrow if you don't pay. So they are borrowing. So I am sure parents have serious loans and, borrowed money just to keep their children in school. And, that's a situation that is not ideal.
Yeah, this is really stressing parents a lot. Very, very much. Yeah, it's really stressing parents. I congratulate parents who are still managing to keep their kids in school. Yeah. It's not easy in those countries. When I think about the fact, like over here, kids go to school for free. They even have free school buses. These guys are playing around with education. Do you know in China actually prioritizes education completely. That's why they're where they are. They prioritize if you look at their budget, the budget of education, especially in China, it's like top 3 items. In the US, it's not. In the UK, it's not. In the US, it's mostly military. In the UK, it's mostly like social services. Social services, NHS, which is good. At least you get the social services. Education is there. But China, we should be following what they're doing in the East in terms of prioritizing the education. All our previous governments, especially the first 2 presidents, first 3, Kenyatta, Moi, and Kibaki, I believe they all prioritized education so much. It was top on the list, And I think this particular government is the one that has decided to literally toss the baby out with the bathwater. I don't see their prioritization of education like the other previous governments. And yet, education is where we actually now ensure that our whole society is assured of having leverage in the world. That's the reason why you have such intelligent young people in Kenya, smart, and people who can resolve problems, solve solutions, create solutions to difficult problems. They're there now. But what's going to happen to future generations if we make education something that is only attainable by people who have money, by the rich? What happens to the other kids? Especially basic education, So I think I saw parents saying, you people, you better not play around. You've been swinging and sliding with our children with the CIC curriculums. Is it called CBC? CBC curriculum? I saw this woman who was so angry on TikTok, and she was like, you know what? You people have been swinging like monkeys on trees on our children here with the different curriculums and stuff. But you dare cheza with our education of our kids. Mutaona. You shall see. Parents go to work because of their children. Number 1, education. Number 2, food. Food, education. They'd rather walk, forget transportation, as long as the kid can get to school, they'll switch the kid's school and bring the child closer to a school where they can walk. So transportation is not even top of the list. As for going, of course, housing is important, but even that, people have sacrificed comfort just to make sure that their children are educated or other people's children are educated. So I think this is something that is a risky thing for any government to play around with, especially African governments and especially ours, because of how highly Kenyans rate education. Grace Agenda is asking a question. I wonder if the GBV and Femicide Task Force is alive to the issues Susan has mentioned. Yeah, Susan, tell us. Do they know the gender-based violence and femicide task force?
Yeah.
Are they
Um,
aware of what's happened to that child? Because that story is very concerning.
yeah, I'm sure they're monitoring, they're collecting views. I think they got an extension on their time when they're supposed to collect views. I think they've been quite. We'll wait to see. I'm looking forward to them actually issuing a report, and so that we can see the extent of it. But I think they've been quite surprised by the extent of violence against women and children that they've come across, and the different types of it and forms of it that are being experienced by women. So I'm sure this has not missed the attention. So it's an ongoing process, and I hope it's going to come up with good and strong proposals to really build, a safer place for women and children, because really they're at risk. In fact, one of the another awful case was one where the father, somewhere in Thika, was molesting his children and
Boy.
his girls. And eventually, what made the authorities aware of what was happening is that the older girl found him molesting her younger sister, and she just had enough of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when they reported him. And imagine, there was a history of him molesting his female children. The brother there, of course, was observing and was not amused by what was happening. And so they were all rescued. They were removed from that space, and the fellow was arrested. So there's something terrible happening. Um, and like, I think one of the viewers was also talked about the importance of education. And then we just talked about how our education system is being so badly affected. So there are different forms and venues and spaces for education. Is education even given at home? Education given in the church? And we should emphasize on keeping our homes and institutions and our cities and our communities safe, uh, for everybody. And of course, those who are most vulnerable are children, and then women, because we can't. Women don't perhaps have the same strength to defend themselves, but we do need to emphasize on keeping our cities, homes, towns, schools safe. Anything that promotes communication through violence, or in my view, um, gender-based violence, especially, even when you talk about the sexual assault, that is an act of violence. It's an
Mm-hmm.
intended to harm and degrade in the most, degrading and humiliating way. Because the likelihood of somebody who has experienced it talking about it is very low. People don't report, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe they'll report after somebody else has witnessed it or something like that. The people do not report it. Whether it's a gender-based violence, which is meted on a male or a female, is something that's very difficult to talk about. And of course, the psychological damage that occurs as a result of that, and that is the potential. When you look at each human being or each person who's born in this country as having the potential, to work and to benefit, their whole potential and their career, it can be so badly damaged by some of these really nasty experiences. So education is very key. And I think, we all need to take a position on that and make sure that our voices are heard and we do not tolerate this sort of abuse. And the media have been very good in reporting and highlighting these cases. And we just hope that even at the communities, we will not tolerate them. Actually, the communities have been quite good. I think they are the ones who highlighted, like the father who was molesting his girls. They pushed for that report to occur. So, I want to applaud those who are brave enough to do that. Yeah, let's be courageous. So, and something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Grace Agenda has some comments here. She's saying that after asking about whether the femicide task force is alive, she's also saying that she's heard that she heard of what she's talking about is education now. She's heard comments from parents that this time they will demonstrate. This will be a Gen X and millennial outcry. And the question she's asking, and what do they budget for and discuss in Parliament? We should ask the education committees in both houses to comment on the same.
Actually, the education committee said they were not going to sign any report. They were not going to pass that budget at all. They said we cannot pass a budget that does not have an allowance for examination and invigilation. Because how do you test the competency of people who have been to school, who have spent years in education, and said, we're not having this. So I think it was sent back. And the excuse that was given by the cabinet was just so ridiculous. They're calling it rationalization. Rationalized by who and what criteria? What does that mean? It's an excuse, a big word to hide the obligations of government to take care of their citizens. Some other big things that have been happening in Kenya is of course, we know Gachagua launched his party. There's actually a revamped Democracy for Citizens Party. And we know there was quite a lot of, it was like I mentioned earlier, it was a messy affair. From the courts, we've seen the Supreme Court of Kenya judges removal case, the petition. We know the 7 petitions were consolidated, and the judges were given some additional time to file any amended pleadings, as I mentioned, on July 4th. And then, of course, with the issue of the Gachagua petition, remember, after he was, they went through the Parliament went through the impeachment process. His lawyers rushed the matter to court. And one of the things that, one of the petitions that went on appeal, if you remember from that particular case, there was some lawyers tried to get they argued that Justice Mwilu, who is the DCJ, Court of Appeal Justice Mwilu, who was the Deputy Chief Justice, had no jurisdiction to empanel those 3 judges. And the court dismissed that, but they went on appeal, and the Court of Appeal said, actually, it's true that it's only the Chief Justice who can empanel judges to hear the type of case that was brought to court, the constitutional matter. And so the question was, of course, what does that mean? I've heard people saying, oh, does that mean we have two deputy presidents, or what exactly does that mean? Because they said that Justice Mwilu had no jurisdiction at all. She acted unconstitutionally, and she could not empanel the judges who heard all those petitions. Remember the petitions that that Gachagua had brought to the court. And so what does that mean? It has been argued that the effect of that is that if the judges who heard the cases had no jurisdiction to hear the cases, then we go back to the position when the court in Kerogoya gave what they called conservatory orders, which means that we call that status quo ante. So that means that Rigiji's position as deputy president, remains, and that Then, of course, there's the question of, so who is Kindiki? And I'm sure others are arguing that that is not actually the case. And then in connection with that, there were some cases that petitions that were withdrawn by Gachagwa's lawyers. And actually that was to ensure that the petitions before the court were not overlapping petitions, so that it was clear about what they were bringing before the courts. On a lighter note, of course, we had for any sports people here, we know Kenyans love sports and we are good at it generally. And so there was the World Relays in Guangzhou in China, and we did quite well. We had 3 teams that are proceeding to the Tokyo Athletics, which is late in September, the world competitions. And there's the mixed 4x400 and the men's 4x400 and the men's 4x100. We have not done that well in the past as Kenyans. We are talking about the short distance runs. We've not done that well, but it looks like we are trying really hard to enter into that particular area. Usually Kenyans, we concentrate on the long distance runs, the 800, which is middle distance, 815, that's middle distance. And then when you go higher, 3,000 meters, 5,000, 10,000, those are now the long distance runs. And that's what we concentrate on. But now we have people actually in the short distance. And, I'm happy when I see that, because what's happening with sports is that we're finding people interested in so many different sports, and it's opening up a space even for our young people to show interest in all types of sports, even field events. I think we have one lady who does archery in Kenya, and we might have some others who can see that, that opportunity is there. And of course, we know with sports, the opportunity to travel, the opportunity, to, elevate your family out of maybe poverty. Very many opportunities come your way because they win money when they compete competitively. Yeah. The other thing, of course, is our relationship with our neighbors. I think we touched on one. That is the Tanzania relationship. We've also talked about the upset caused perhaps by the Besigye removal from Kenya, the alleged support of it by our security forces. And then, of course, we have the issue with Sudan, where now we're in trouble. We're in hot soup again because a Kenyan pilot was gunned down. He was alleged to be ferrying, some weaponry to the RSF, and the RSF are fighting. Remember the situation in Sudan. We have the RSF, and don't forget that they came here and selected their leaders, or they declared
They created
themselves
a parallel
independent.
government.
Yes,
in Nairobi at
in
KICC.
Kenya, in Nairobi. Yeah.
Just imagine.
Yeah. And
we Kenyans, we like to play with our lives, eh? Hey, guy.
Yeah.
No, man.
So there's that.
This is not good.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
so there's
you were
that
telling me
issue.
also about Congo, DRC. Who was that to
Yeah.
tell me about Edward Sifuna trying to go there to do something, and he was turned
They
back?
weren't allowed in.
Now you
Yeah,
see,
they were stopped.
that's called being
They were not
deported.
allowed in. Yeah.
Deportation is the new big word these days, guys. If you hear that you're deported,
They were
just say,
turned away.
you know, anyone who has been deported from anywhere now, it's a badge of honor. You've been through it. You've been through it, so now you know how to survive it. Yeah, you're now a full member of society. They say, there was this saying, I used to talk to some guys sometimes, and they say, if you haven't been to prison, then you're not a man. Now it's going to be that if you haven't been deported, you haven't traveled. You haven't. You haven't. It's going to be a badge of honor very soon. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Yeah. The inhumanity that is going on in the world is just unbelievable. We're just losing our Ubuntu, our Africanness, our humanity. And then, by the way, we just recently had a visit by the king of, or is it the president of Finland? And in fact, that was
Yes,
one of the
stop.
biggest issues, one of the biggest news. And my question is, why? I have nothing against Finland. I've been to Finland actually, you know. Those days I used to work for the NGOs. I've been to Helsinki. I've been to Finland. I've been to many countries, but I have nothing against them. They are organized societies. But the question is, why are these people coming to Kenya? What is it that they're getting from Kenya? What are we promising them? What is it that they're actually seeking? He said that Kenya is going to be like at the top of the, you know, one of the key players of the new world order. Which one? Which new world order? Because there are so many. There's the African New World Order by Traore and co. And then there's a global world order by Klaus, World Trade Organization. You will own nothing and be happy. Yeah, have you guys heard that one? 15-minute cities. Yeah, that's Klaus Schwab, World Trade Organization. That's the other new world order. Then there's another new world order by Trump. Have you people heard of this new world order? Get rid of all the migrants, immigrants. As long as you're not a US citizen, you have potential to be thrown out of the country. And even if you're a US citizen, who knows, you know? There's that world order as well. Yeah? So there's so many different world orders going on. And then we also have the BRICS nations. That's another world order. We have the BRICS nations, and okay, so there we go. We have Brazil. It's cool. Brazil, Russia, India, and the rest of them. That's another world order. So there are like about 6 different world orders. So which world order is this particular president of Finland talking about? That Kenyans are going to be leading. If Kenyans don't even know what new world order they're leading, why is it that a foreign president is telling us that he's coming to Kenya because we are going to be showing the way? We will be showing the way. We will be leading the new world order. I know there's another world order that he talks about because he's a historian and he's also an author. This particular president is apparently very educated, you know, highly educated, well respected. I heard one of his presentations. He's talking about World War One. There was first World War One, then there was World War Two, then there was a Cold War, then now there's a new world order, and now apparently there's another new world order. So my question is, which world order? You guys know, we have to be careful not to agree to be tagged. Nobody should be tagging us. Yeah, we want to determine our course. Nobody should be coming to tell us about being leaders in anything, because that's the way that they play this divide and rule tactics with Africans. Yeah, and with different countries. We have to be very careful. And some people are like, oh, I'm so happy. I love the Finnish president. Oh, wow, you know, we're going to be top again. No, this is not another marathon that we're winning. This is not another Olympic marathon. This is a game. This is a political game, and we have to be wary of it based on our history.
Yeah, I remember he was quite vocal on the Russia-Ukraine war. You know, Finland has that long border with Russia. So he was very vocal and clear. I'm not surprised he's the president now, because this is the season that Europe is facing when the war is ongoing. And when you talk about changes or political changes, and when you're talking about world order, changes, I was watching a video about in Britain, there's a party called the Homeland Party. And they believe in something they're calling remigration. And basically, they're trying to reduce the number of non-white in Britain. And they're calling it remigration, and they're explaining it differently. But the journalists, when they delved into it, it sort of reflected that they were trying to just reduce the number of non-white people in Britain, because they feel that there are too many non-white people in Britain, and their values have been eroded and stuff like that. So we're finding a lot of extremism. So we have gone from one extreme to the other we're
Will
going
not
from
be
one extreme
tolerant.
now
Yeah.
to the other one, which
Yeah.
seems to be a reaction to the extremism on this side. So I think historians sort of say that, I saw a video, I didn't watch it, but I saw the title says, why we go from one extreme to the other. Because
Yeah.
one extreme pulls out, all these extremists on this other side come out from the woodworks, and then they start pulling back in this extreme direction. So this is definitely a very, in fact, we're saying that it's, very fascist party, and it's in Britain. Have you heard
Yeah,
about
but
it, the Homeland
what
Party?
they fail to tell us, although we'll have a geopolitical show where I'll have done a bit more research, but what they're failing to tell us is that actually migrants are the ones that are actually keeping the UK people still in a position where they can access free medical care. Because the migrants, the non-white migrants are the ones who mostly are students, international students, who pay astronomical fees that enable British people to go to school, because the international students, in fact, many universities are just about to collapse because international students pay about £9,000 more a year for their education. And to educate a British person, it's only about £3,000. So for every one international student studying in the UK, they're educating at least 2 or 3 local students. That's number one. Number two, they contribute to the National Health Service here. They have to pay. They don't get health services for free, international students and international migrants. They don't. Yeah, they have to pay into the NHS. Number three, apart from that, the biggest migrants in this country actually are Ukrainians. People from Ukraine. They're white. They're like them. The other group was Hong Kong. A huge group of people from Hong Kong and another group from Afghanistan because of their history, with Afghanistan. The rest, they're very minority. The minority are actually the blacks, the Nigerians, the Africans. We are the minority migrants, and we're the ones who work the most. In fact, in terms of, I had done some research on this before and discovered that, in fact, we actually retain jobs. We are working full-time jobs at a higher rate than the locals, than the natives. At the highest rate. We're the most employed. So we're the ones paying the taxes. So when the migrants go, these people's cushion is gone. And therefore, what these politicians do, they use migration as rhetoric, as an anchor, because they know that the population want to hear this. They want to hear it. So they use that as a way, as a ticket for them to get, to get the votes and to get elected. But then in the end, they always go back and now start creating routes for migrants, especially immigrants from places like Africa, with young people, young educated people, and countries like those. The same thing is happening in the US. So behind, right in the back, they're doing something different from what they're presenting in the front. But unfortunately, that creates a lot of insecurity for migrants right now, because especially the students, and many of them are leaving. Many of them are choosing not to come to the UK. And apart from that, there's also out migration that they're not talking about. Is it called emigration? They don't also give proper statistics on the number of people leaving the UK, including British citizens themselves. We're talking about like 500,000 last year left. Of those, we don't know what percentage, but there's a huge percentage of British actually leaving the country. Many of them are immigrants. They go to Spain. Many of them are in Spain. Many of them are in, which other countries are these? In the Caribbean. So many of them in the Caribbean. Many of them are in Asia, Australia. And some of them are in Africa. Some of them are in the US. So migration is not just about color of skin. It's been deduced into these factors that really, very nonsensical factors. The fact is that the immigrants who come from Africa, especially African immigrants, most of them are young. They come with their family. Now they have denied care workers the chance to come with their families. So how many people are going to come here and work as care workers if you can't come here with your family? It's another kind of slavery, because you remember during slavery times, you separated families That is very bad for people's mental health, especially in a place where people don't have anyone else to talk to. When you come over here, you become kind of like isolated. It's only you and your family. And if you don't have your family to talk to, you'll have a mental health problem. And then you become a liability on the system, because now you become, ill. You can get ill, and you might actually need benefits as well. You might need to go into the benefit system. So anyway, it's a very
Yeah,
simplistic way of looking at immigration, and also a little bit
yeah,
hypocritical, rather hypocritical.
yeah. I
It's just
just came
politics,
across those videos. Yeah, it's really sad that,
dirty
uh,
politics, yeah. Anyway, we
yeah,
should be
so,
winding up now. We promise that we're not going to keep this very long, so we can give it maybe another 10 to 15 minutes, and then we can wind up. Susan, what else have we not covered in this chat? You guys, what else
yeah,
have we not covered? Thank you for your comments. Please continue commenting and talk to us. Fia, if
yeah.
you're available, we'd love to hear from you. Chris Agenda. I keep on mentioning people's names. And we have a new person called Gypsy Corner. Karibuni, yes. Gypsy Corner calls themselves a Pan-Africanist. Yeah. That's very interesting. That's a Traore issue now. Let's talk Pan-Africanism. We could talk about next time, but right now we're actually focusing on Kenya. And if you have anything that you want to talk about your own country, feel free to talk about it here, because we're looking at our countries, and our countries happen to be Kenya. For me, I also have the UK, but today is not the day to discuss that. Yeah, too much. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at the Sunday Nation,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about this affordable housing project and the impact it has had, and the disputes and some of the issues. In fact, it's headed eviction pain in Ruto's housing project. Some people have been evicted from certain areas, and promises made and unfulfilled. You know, and it's happening everywhere. Nairobi, Langata, Huruma,
Mm-hmm.
Marigoni estates. People have been
Mm-hmm.
evicted,
Hey.
and others are living in fear of losing their homes. And they're saying, "Okay, you move out, and then we'll build these affordable housing."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and then the courts have also stopped some of there have been court cases which have stalled some of the projects. And then the government has been accused of grabbing land. Some of the land that's been grabbed is for religious purposes. You know, in each community, when the city planners do the planning, there's a part set aside for, like, community spaces, like for churches and for prayer spaces. So there've been a lot of pushback. It's causing a lot of dissatisfaction. Mount Kenya, they're saying churches have been torn down, and in Mombasa, they've, like, this particular estate called Buxton. They feel betrayed because they were told they would have first priority when the houses go up. Of course, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Wasingishu, same problem. Uh, Complaints also of undercompensation, and then when you have to move elsewhere. So, for instance, the houses they've been moved out of, they were
Mm-hmm.
paying much less, and now they're paying where they need to stay. This is like in Buxton, they're paying like twice that amount. So um, they're saying here, displaced residents had to move to different areas. You know where Buxton is in
Yes.
Mombasa? Yeah.
Yes.
So they
Mm-hmm.
had to move to Michomoroni, Bamburi, and Miritini, and they're paying double the rent they once did. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So some of these things have
So
impacted.
you're
You know,
saying
this
that
is the
the
flagship.
people who bought, sorry, you're saying that the people who bought units, they bought units
No,
at Boston, they have been moved, or did I get you
no,
wrong? If I did.
remember they did a demolition the other day. They knocked them down, and somebody actually got hurt. So what they've
Oh,
done is
yes.
they've all those residents have been moved out so that they
Yeah.
can build up these affordable housing projects. So they've
Oh,
been
I
moved out,
see.
and well, they've been told to get out, to move out, and
Are
so
you
they've
talking
had
about
to
that
go.
building that was falling the other day? There's
Yeah,
a
that's
building that was
Buxton.
falling in Yali, and the reason it was falling is that
Hmm.
it was built with it was built with wrong amounts of concrete or something. The person who bought the concrete bought too much concrete, and therefore it started to sink. And it's just not, well, something to do with, I don't really know whether it's too much or too little, but generally, the building standards were not properly followed. And
Yeah.
so they're planning to actually rebuild the place up and put up affordable housing in the same unit. Is that it?
Yes, but
So that's
yeah,
the
but they're not.
owner, therefore, that has sold the plot to the government. Is that it? So they're going to be making money from there.
Yeah, they've sort of they've decided, like Buxton, which
But
is
it was a
different.
very big loss
They
for them.
did a demolition. There's supposed to be a professional um, demolition of the houses, so they're supposed to come down in a sort of organized way.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, it didn't quite happen. I think there were some injuries. The army were responsible for bringing down those flats.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the residents had to move, and they had to move to places where they're paying twice the rent. So there's a
Oh,
lot of there's a lot of concern
yeah.
about this, and corruption, allegations of land grabbing by the government and stuff like that. So this is a story that featured in the Sunday Nation, taking up of the tearing down of churches and taking up religious spaces, just having no regard really for the concerns of the community. And then, of course, at the end of the day, even when they go up, the people who are promised first dibs on the houses don't get them. And I think there have been some cases. I remember listening to, I was watching the discussion about the business amendment laws and the tax laws. And somebody raised the issue about in the Gara area, they built some of these affordable housing houses. And he said, I've been paying and I still don't have a unit, but I see there are people living in those houses. So the system somehow did not benefit people who expected
Mm-hmm.
to get the houses. Other people got those houses. So there are lots of concerns about that. And this is supposed to be one of the flagships of the Kenya Kwanza, this affordable housing, and also the health care system, the SHA shift
Yeah.
Taifa, Taifa
Yeah.
care, whatever they're calling it. Yeah.
Affordable housing is a real murky mess, because the fact is that they're so affordable for those people who already have big government jobs. So there's a conflict of interest, and many of them are investing in whole blocks of those affordable housing. And then I also saw, like I had said earlier before, there was somebody who actually was paying for his unit, but when he paid for his unit to e-citizen account, he never, first of all, received, he never saw he never saw the number of units reduce. The number of units remained, although he was still paying for his unit. Another issue is that the people who are paying for the units have already paid and completed. Some of them have even paid and completed paying for a unit, but they're still being charged taxes. So depending on how much money you earn and how long you've been paying, let's say a unit is 2 million, yeah? Maybe you've already paid that much in taxes. So you've paid for one, now you're maybe paying for a second one and a third one, and you'll never own any. The idea was that the government said to these people that if you're employed and you have a job, you're lucky, you buy a unit on behalf of somebody else, which really doesn't make any sense, especially for people who either have their own homes or who are renting their own homes and can't, live in those homes. But yeah, the affordable housing unit issue is something that might end up blowing up in time. Oh, by the way, Fia has some comments here about the issue of migration and migrants, because Fia is actually here in the UK with me. She's saying, seriously, African governments need to stop the exodus of our productive citizens. Although they leave, like us, to provide for their families back home, it's a catch-22 situation. I agree. I agree. And a lot of people have, started to warn people about the idea of leaving their countries to come to the West, especially with no plan to return. Because as young people are leaving, brain drain is happening. And it's interesting that those people who are calling the young people here are, on the other hand, going back themselves to purchase land and property in Africa. So the question is, we have governments which are making it easy to move to the West, but then we also have people, powerful tycoons in the West, who are eyeing Africa and eyeing land in Africa. So I think Africans need to ask themselves many questions before they move to the West. And also, even if you do move to the West, it's good to have a plan B and to invest in your country. Invest in your country, build your house, or build someone something, build businesses, because it's good to have a plan B just in case you end up getting deported. Yes, even with all your papers intact, it's very possible, because the whole idea of identity and belonging is also important. Even if your children, they were saying, even if your children is a citizen of the Western countries, acceptability, belonging is a big issue. And therefore, it's important for us to remember to invest back home. Where is it? Like, there was somebody who asked a question: if you have a lot of money, where would you invest it? Where would you choose to live? If money wasn't an issue, where would you choose to live? If you ask that to most Africans here in the diaspora, they will say back in their countries if they had the money. Because many of them leave because of insecurity, so they can secure themselves if they had money, right? So, or they leave because they don't have jobs, they don't have facilities, for their children, for themselves. They can't grow, they can't grow their businesses. But if money wasn't a problem, they would rather be at home, obviously. So then in that case, then one should actually invest back home. Even if one goes out, there's nothing wrong with leaving. There's nothing wrong with traveling. Nothing wrong with living abroad. Nothing at all. In fact, it's good. It widens your scope. Even Africans before colonialism, Africans always traveled. And we had sayings about it. The first people in the US, in fact, they discovered, were African blacks. And they have discovered this through the kind of equipment, the swords and spears that had been found with Native Americans. They used to give them as gifts to the Native Americans. And when they compare the iron and the copper and the metals in those swords and the designs, they actually trace them back to West Africa, some West African countries. So basically, or regions of West Africa, that means that there were many people who traveled from the western part of Africa to the Americas way before colonization, way before enslavement. And this is the history that we are not taught. We are only taught our history from colonialism going forward in the history books. And it's interesting that in these countries of ours, like the UK and the Western countries, they are not taught their own colonial history. We in Africa know their colonial history, but they don't know their own colonial history. They don't know it. They're not taught it. They're not taught that they colonized countries. They're not taught that their ancestors colonized people, that their ancestors enslaved people. They're not taught those things. But we in Africa are taught that we were colonized, that we were defeated, that our people were, So, this is history that is being told from the perspective of the colonizer, of, the person who won from the winner. Winner tells it all, yeah? The winner tells it all, right? And takes it all. And this is the problem, that we need to rewrite history so that we can include the history of our ancestors and the history of our culture before colonization and after also, because that is also not being told right now. What's happening right now? We're not really documenting enough what we're doing. So thank you, guys. Susan, I think we can wrap up now, yeah? Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a really lovely session. I've seen you there on the live show. It's been so nice. I had to turn this camera around and face this way because I realized that I wasn't getting adequate light. It's still light now over here. It's 10 o'clock, actually 10:20 in Nairobi, so it's a bit late. Over here, it's about 8:20, so it's still early. So thank you so much for your time. See you next week, Monday, talking about Kenya, but we'll try to come on board maybe Friday or Sunday with a mental health show. Thank you so much, guys. Cheers. Take care. And thank you for being here. Be blessed. Take care. Kwaherini. Bye. Bye, Suzanne. Thank you.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Mm-hmm.